This is a really bad idea. Guys, have you ever heard of Ivan the Terrible?
Yes.
He was
No, of course not.
I didn't like that
Foot
giggle.
Clan, like Ninja Turtles. He did like fought the Ninja Turtles.
Shredder.
I knew one guy named Ivan.
Mm-hmm.
Was he cool?
Or was he terrible?
He was all right.
Well, yeah.
Ivan the Eye.
He was
Ivan the
kinda
Eye.
hot.
Ivan the
I don't
Alright.
know.
Ivan the Eye.
Ivan the okay.
I went to high school with him. He was kind of hot. I don't know.
Ivan the Terrible, as we know him in these days, or Ivan Vasilievich IV, was known commonly as Ivan the Terrible to the rest of the Western world. Also referred to by Russians as Ivan Grozny. Grozny meaning terrible, but terrible not in the sense of like, that dude is terrible at shuffleboard.
Right.
Like in the sense that this dude is awesome, awe-inspiring, or intimidating, formidable. He is
like Ivan the Bad.
Ivan the Badass.
Yeah.
Like, so Ivan Vasilievich IV was born in 1530. So this is just barely after Rus, as Russia was formerly known, was let go of control by the Tatars, who are the descendants of the Mongols. Genghis Khan being the only successful ruler to ever successfully conquer and invade Russia.
I did not know that.
I like how you use the
Don't know
Genghis, not the
that.
Genghis, even
It's
though my
Genghis.
cat's name is
Genghis.
Genghis, but it is Genghis.
It is.
With Russian culture, they had the patronymics. His name was Ivan. The last name Vasilievich means son of Vasil.
Oh, nice.
Yes, that's how they did it. Well, I don't know why.
Point.
But so his father was actually murdered when Ivan was only 3 years old.
Oh,
and
whoa.
this forces this young child at the age of 3 to be the Muscovy, the great prince.
At 3?
Yes.
That won't
3?
twist it all.
So you have to think at
Jeez.
this time that this is basically during the Renaissance era in Western Europe. Russia, however, due to their language and due to geographic divides, was still basically in the Dark Ages, in medieval era sort of technologies and such. The territories were broken up into principalities, and each of these were governed by a prince. Moscow, or Muskov, was considered the greatest of all of these, and so the great prince of Muskov was considered to be the general ruler, but there was not a czar until Ivan the Terrible. So at the age of 3, he was crowned the great prince of Muskov,
Like the entire area.
of the Principality of
Wow.
Moscow. And at this time, at the age of 3, his mother, the queen, tried to act as regent, and there is many, many bitter battles between the boyars, or the aristocracy, and directly their family. So she had many of his uncles and his direct family members executed or locked up in jail.
Jesus Christ. As a 3-year-old kid.
As a 3-year-old kid,
Wow!
she is trying to protect him to make sure that this child is not murdered in order to steal his throne.
Common theme in like early monarchy is that like being shocked that like at 3 he was the prince. It's like that. No, they were all little kids that had their parents killed and shit. Like it was terrible
No,
assassination plots constantly.
I'm not shocked at that. I'm just shocked that like that could have been like one of those Fox specials when young monarchs kill. You know, it's like this 3-year-old going, "Fuck you, Dad."
No, it's basically like that kid that's on that viral video everybody's been watching where they gets in a fight with that dude. That's basically him. That's basically it. That that video. That'll make you mad.
So imagine the opposite of that, where basically people are trying to abuse this 3-year-old kid and perhaps murder him in order to get his power. So this
They're
goes
really
on,
easy to kill.
This goes on for 5 years. The queen tries to protect him, and
So that would be infanticide and what's
Regicide.
regicide.
Well,
yes.
he's not the king
Well,
yet,
he's
right?
not princesside.
Kind of, yeah.
Princesside. So this goes on for 5 years, and then when Ivan is 8 years old, his mother dies.
Oopsies.
Fuck.
Many suspect it was due to poisoning. So, this only compounds his fear and paranoia of murder and basically subterfuge against his power. And it is also during this time that he is basically abused. He's neglected, he is starved, he is locked away for many hours, while warring factions try to take hold of the seat of power. And it is also noted that during this time that he starts to develop certain sociopathic tendencies. There are many apocryphal tales of young Ivan capturing animals,
I saw that coming. That was
Taking them
I
to-
saw that coming the door, man.
the top of the Kremlin, which is the royal palace, and throwing them off the side to watch them die.
That's horrible.
He is known quite frequently to torture animals and takes great joy in it.
That's the number one psycho
Yep.
trait right there, man.
Yep.
But was this before Sir Isaac Newton?
Are you serious?
Maybe
He was
he didn't know
he was
gravity.
like a renegade scientist, maybe? You're just testing theories?
I'm just testing gravity on
The
these
squirrel,
rides.
it fell, but maybe the chicken won't.
But mother, I thought it was a cat balloon.
No, it's a fish. I mean, a
It's
fish.
a fish balloon. So, basically, this child is infused with terror. A few years pass, 5 more years. At the age of 13, Ivan starts to come into his own, starts to realize what power he actually has. He calls a meeting of all of the boyars, the aristocracy, their council, calls them for a Christmas feast. One in particular who opposes him, Andrei Shuisky. He calls out for his, perhaps underhanded, behind the back, trying to seize some power, drags him outside, throws him to his private slew of dogs, and has the man ripped apart
my
and
God.
savaged.
Whoa.
Yes, at the age of 13, he commands this to happen. And this just leads only to a years and years, perhaps 40 years, of a penchant for torture and destruction. By the time he is 17, he then has his own coronation performed, where he declares himself the Tsar of Russia. And Tsar is just a diminutive of the Latin form of Caesar. So he declares himself the emperor of all
No
of Russia.
shit. I didn't know that.
Ivan the
Nice.
Terrible was considered the very first Tsar of Russia. And by
And this is the 16th century?
this is the 16th century. So this is around 1546 or so, 1547. And by emperor, I mean he has direct power from God and God alone to rule this country and do as he sees fit with it.
That sounds shockingly similar to some people I know.
Shockingly Russian.
Well, actually, Russian is kind of appropriate.
Ah!
I don't get it.
Early enough in his reign as emperor, oddly, Ivan was quite a progressive and some would say a good man. This is due in particular to his marriage of his first wife, Anastasia Romanovna. He was very much in love with this woman.
This sounds hot, doesn't it?
Yes, it does sound.
Novna.
But the way that he picked her, maybe not so hot. He had a contest of virgins and had them paraded in front of his court.
Oh, no.
Who's the most virgin of you?
That was such a great left turn. That was
Yeah.
amazing.
Contest.
He had these women paraded in front of him, and he selected her. But
Run, Anastasia.
it
Run.
is considered that they loved each other very much, and they had a
Oh.
very
Alright.
strong love. And she
That's
produced
nice.
4 children for him.
Produced.
Unfortunately,
I like the
Produced.
term.
well, she bore 4 children for him.
Bore is even worse.
Well, that's more appropriate.
Out of the 8 children he had with his 6 wives, the 2 sons that Anastasia
wives.
lived the longest.
Oh, wow.
6 of them died very early on. We're talking 3,
16th
4
century
years
Russia,
or less.
yeah, I mean,
yes.
yeah, whatever the
So
fuck.
most of the children died. His 2 sons lived to be the oldest that were produced by Anastasia. When Anastasia unfortunately died in 1560, Ivan was 30 years old. It destroyed him. His first wife, whom he loved dearly, Anastasia, passed away, and he suspected poisoning. Just
no.
like his
His
mother.
mom.
Oh, that'll get you a little twisted.
So it's at this time he loses it.
Goes full
And-
Joffrey.
Yep, goes all
Great mommy
all
shit.
rules go out the window. He starts torturing to no end, and yet it's odd because he was a strictly and deeply Christian Orthodox man. He was known for building these great cathedrals.
At
all over the
what
place.
point has Christianity divorced itself from torture or depravity?
If you're
Let's have
thinking
the
16th
discussion.
century at the same time, or roughly around that era, it's the Spanish Inquisition. It's
Exactly.
he's doing the same sort of things. He is literally flaying people, boiling people.
He's
Yikes.
Ramsey. He's like
There-
an early Ramsey. He's
there
got the
is-
dogs. He's got the
Creepy as
flame.
hell.
There is a tale, and this comes up around the same time. So at the death of his wife in 1560, he actually gives up his power at one point and leaves in 1564. And the aristocracy fucks things up so badly that they beg him to come back.
Wow. You know that psychotic little fucker? We need that guy back in here. He got stuff
Weird.
Too
done.
many dudes are walking
Okay.
around. We got too many dogs. There's no one knows how to handle this situation except for
Someone
Ivan
get
the
these
Terrible.
dogs eating some people right about now.
He can definitely track money. He makes a hell of a blueberry muffin. Let's get him back.
Ivan departed Moscow for Alexandra Sloboda, and he announces his abdication. The Boyar court is unable to rule, so they beg him to come back, and he goes, okay, but you have to let me rule with absolute dictatorship. I have to be allowed to do whatever I want, and it is in this point they agree. They give up
What could go
all
wrong?
of their rights, and most historians agree that Russia during this period thrives under dictatorship. The period after Ivan the Terrible died is known as the Time of Turmoil. So under him, they feel like, well, he held things together at least.
What?
So this leads to the creation of the
terrifies me, man.
Oprichnina. Oprichnina refers to basically a small region of where, of course, the wealthiest populated, that Ivan had absolute control over. The rest of it was allowed to be controlled by the boyars, but Ivan had the Oprichnina. And the Oprichnina came in conjunction with the creation of the Oprichniki. The Oprichniki were basically, some would say, a version of the KGB.
Yeah,
a
like
secret guard.
police.
Wow.
These men
Okay.
dressed all in black. They wore black cloaks, and their emblem was a dog's head with a broom. The dogs would hunt you down. The brooms would clean out the scourge inhabiting the country.
You gotta love branding. Even back then, branding was really
Didn't they,
important.
Dog witches.
They were personally selected by Ivan. They were criminals. They were murderers. They were the ruthless men of this country, and yet he considered them to be his quote-unquote monks.
Didn't they ride around with dogs' heads on their saddles
Yes, they
to
did.
show people that they were part of this group?
Yes, they did.
They're like, what's the most inviting color? Light blue, light pink? No, fuck that. We're going to do black. And
Brindle
instead of-
Pitbull head. Is the
Instead of
most
throwing
inviting
out
color.
chocolates, we're just going to show them severed dog heads.
So in 1566, the Oprichnina was extended to 8 central districts. Of 12,000 nobles, I'm quoting Wikipedia here, 570 became Oprichniks, and the rest were expelled, persecuted, or executed.
Whoa, wow.
Oh.
That was a few people.
And when I say persecuted and executed, Ivan himself took personal pleasure in this, but all because of, it had been bestowed by God into
Of course.
his power to
Of course.
do so. He had a private torture chamber.
Hadn't he had selected these people to be able to, they had a license to kill, basically. They were allowed to execute based on their own whim as they were kind of riding through these towns with their dog head, like...
They all were double O's. They had license to kill. They're all double O's.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, double O means license to kill.
Jesus Christ. This whole
Broccoli
time.
family. Points.
There you go. So this all comes about 10 years after what Ivan had done was the expansion of Russia by defeating the Tatars in the city of Kazan. So this is on the eastern border of Russia, which gives them access to the Volga River. He eventually annexed Astrakhan there too. So almost Russia was landlocked except for the north, which in the winter would freeze, screwing over the Russian people. So it was huge for Russia to get access to Volga, the main river in Russia. This is 10 years later. He is considered and lauded to be, a great ruler, and then he becomes so very, very cruel. So much
After being so nice. After being so nice with the
yeah.
flailing and the dog eating.
Well, you have to think under his rule, there was almost 4 decades of war. The Tartars constantly trying to invade, and there was the Russo-Turkish War. There was Livonia, which failed miserably. There was
Stankonia, which was no.
Stankonia.
Bombs over Baghdad.
Hey,
was-
I'm sorry, Miss Jackson.
It would take centuries for that dream to realize.
Tartar sauce from the Tartar Empire?
Well,
Tartar is the residue, if I may, from the
Yes.
inside of casks of wine.
I don't know.
It's
Jesus
a
Christ.
powdery white
If you
residue
know what
from
tartar
wine.
sauce is,
Well, I'm not
message
saying
us at
Richard Crenna
Fritz
invented tartar
MTT.
sauce. Everybody
I'm
knows
not
that.
saying tartar. I'm saying Tatar.
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 I'm saying
Tatar.
tartar.
Tatar. Those are the descendants of the Mongols. So there were also Crimean raids, and this leads eventually to the raid of Moscow in the 1570s, which leads to the Great Fire of 1570, which was caused by the Tatars, and as many as 10,000 to, get this, 80,000
Whoa.
people died in this fire.
What?
That's a big swath right there between 10 and
Right.
80.
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
They just skew the numbers just a little bit. Just a
Census
little bit.
information was tough back then.
After 1570, under the Oprichniki and the Livonian War, Ivan grew very suspicious that the entire population of one of the most prestigious cities in Russia, Novgorod, was planning to defect or overthrow him. And so what did he do?
Burned it?
He burned it.
Burned
He
it.
pillaged it. He destroyed it. He set upon the city himself, leading an army, and over 5 weeks, he massacred almost every single person in this.
Jeez.
How big
And
is
he
the
got his
city?
hands dirty.
They say at the time it was between 10 to 20,000 people inhabiting this city. They say that 500 to 600 people died every single day.
Jesus
They were killed
Christ.
hell of
or
an output.
drowned. This was not only the nobility, but peasants, smaller people, and big people. It was men, women, and children, some as younger than the age of 12. And there were devious plans or devious torture devices. One of the most infamous is a giant frying pan that was used to literally fry people to death or filled with oil and boil people to death. People were skinned. People were tied to the blades of sleighs and driven into frozen lakes. That is, again, one of the most bone-chilling stories, is that he forced an entire family, including the children, to march themselves into a frozen lake to be drowned.
Man, human beings suck.
Yeah, they do.
Ivan the Terrible perhaps earned the sobriquet by killing his own son, Ivan.
Wow, that's a step up.
This is perhaps one of the most tragic stories surrounding him. So Ivan, who was to be heir, Ivan V, his wife was pregnant. Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Vasilievich, knew this, and yet because of his piety and his depravity at the same time, he thought that she had been dressed a little bit too immodestly. So he proceeded to beat her ruthlessly, and that same night she miscarried.
Oh, no.
Ivan V confronted his father in a rage, and in response, Ivan the Terrible then beat his son around the head with his famed walking staff, which was a pointed spear, struck his son in the head, and basically beat him to death. Ivan, seeing that he had killed his own child, clasped him in his arms and said, I'm paraphrasing here, said that I am such a wretch that I have killed my own son. And this murder haunted him for the rest of his life.
You hope.
Until he died at the age of 54, playing chess with his friend Bogdan.
What the hell?
Wednesdays with Bogdan.
He died doing what he loved to do most, manipulating pieces that are inferior to him.
But do you really want to become such a piece of shit like that, Fritz? Come on, if you're going to invade, of all places, North